It was night, and a thick fog had covered the streets around the university. Laughter and loud music echoed from a student house at the end of the street. In the middle of a group of friends stood Emily, holding a cup in her hand, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She was always different, and that very difference had drawn her toward a group of boys who were both charming and mysterious. Jake, the leader of the group, swiftly approached Emily with a mischievous smile and said, "Emily, you're always the center of attention. Everyone's eyes are on you." Emily laughed and replied, "Maybe because I'm the only one who can actually keep up with you guys." Ryan, standing in the corner, added in a calm voice, "Or maybe because you're the only one we truly trust." But there was something in the air, something Emily couldn't quite grasp. Lingering glances, subtle jokes, and moments that blurred the line between friendship and something else. Tyler, with his athletic build, slowly stepped closer to Emily and said, "You're really special. You know that?" Emily chuckled. "So are all of you." But deep down, she felt something strange. There was something in Tyler's eyes that unsettled her. Nate, the creative one of the group, suddenly suggested, "Why don't we start a new adventure tonight? Something we'll never forget." Jake responded enthusiastically, "I'm in. And what's better than having Emily with us?" Despite all the warnings she had heard from her other friends, Emily smiled and agreed. She believed these boys were her true friends, that they would never harm her. But that night, something changed. In the darkness, whispers passed between the boys. Jake was the first to voice it. "Don't you think Emily is different from other girls?" Ryan frowned. "What do you mean?" Jake smirked. "I mean, she's special. She's not like the others. She's one of us." Tyler gave a sly smile. "One of us, right? She's definitely more than just another girl." Nate chuckled. "Yeah, but she doesn't see it. That makes her even more intriguing." This conversation wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something darker. Their admiration for Emily slowly turned into an obsession. They started fantasizing about her, wondering what would happen if they crossed the line of friendship. At first, they kept these thoughts to themselves. But the more time they spent together, the more their boundaries blurred. Their late-night conversations turned into whispered confessions of their fantasies, and each of them secretly wondered, were the others feeling the same way too? It was a night that seemed ordinary, but beneath the surface of calm, a storm was brewing. After a loud and lively party, Jake brought up the topic again. His voice was quiet, but filled with implication. "Have you ever thought about Emily in a different way?" Ryan hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "What do you mean?" Jake responded casually. "I mean, she's gorgeous. We all know it. And she trusts us. We're not going to hurt her or anything, but maybe we could try something." Tyler frowned. "What are you saying?" Jake shrugged. "I'm just saying, if there's any girl who would understand, it's Emily." Nate let out a nervous laugh. "You're insane, man. If she ever found out we were talking about her like this, she'd kill us." But the conversation didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, their discussions became bolder, their fantasies more detailed. They started justifying their thoughts, convincing themselves it was just a harmless game. During one of their late-night talks, Jake said, "She's one of us. She'd probably just laugh if we told her." Tyler agreed. "Yeah, she's cool. She wouldn't get upset." Ryan nodded, though his expression showed slight concern. "I mean, we're not actually going to do anything. We're just talking, right?" Nate smirked. "Right, just talking." But deep down, they all knew it wasn't just talk. The idea that had been planted in their minds was growing stronger every day. It had become a dark, unspoken bond between them, something they would never mention in front of Emily, yet something they couldn't stop thinking about when they were alone. Emily, oblivious to it all, continued her friendship with them. She trusted them completely, and never imagined that a storm was gathering. Her classmates, however, were not so blind. They had noticed the way the boys looked at Emily, how their jokes had taken on a darker edge. They warned her again, but she wouldn't listen. "You don't know them like I do," she said, dismissing their concerns. "They're not like that." But they were, and the closer their friendship grew, the stronger their urge became to act on the fantasies they had tried to suppress. What had started as innocent friendships had now turned into something much more dangerous. Emily trusted them completely, and would never have imagined that they might betray her in the worst way possible. The bonds she had worked so hard to build were on the verge of breaking, and her world would never be the same again. The night that changed everything started like any other. Emily and her friends had planned to go to a club near campus, one of their favorite places to unwind after a stressful week. Jake, Ryan, Tyler, and Nate arrived in high spirits to pick her up. Laughing and joking, they ushered Emily into the car from her dorm. She wore a simple yet striking outfit that highlighted her natural beauty, and the boys couldn't help but steal lingering glances. As Emily got into the car, Jake said, "Emily, you look absolutely stunning." Emily smiled. "Thanks," completely unaware of the looks being exchanged between her friends. The night started harmlessly enough. They danced, drank, and laughed, losing themselves in the music and energy of the club. Emily felt completely at ease among the people she trusted most. But, as the night went on, the boys' behavior began to change. They kept ordering round after round of drinks, encouraging Emily to join them. Nate laughed. "Come on, Emily. You always say you can outdrink us. Prove it." Emily chuckled and took the glass. "You guys are gonna regret challenging me." The alcohol flowed quickly, and before long, Emily felt lightheaded. She laughed at everything, her words slightly slurred. The boys were drunk, too. Their laughter was louder, their movements more reckless. But beneath the surface, something darker was bubbling. Jake leaned in close to Ryan and murmured, "Tonight is the night." Ryan hesitated, glancing over at Emily, who was laughing with Tyler and Nate. "Are you sure?" Jake's eyes gleamed. "Yeah." Ryan looked at Emily, who was laughing with Tyler and Nate. "Are you sure?" Jake asked with bright eyes, confirming. "She trusts us. She understands." Ryan didn't respond, but concern was evident on his face. As the night progressed, the group decided to leave the club and head to a nearby hotel. Jake had already booked a room, using the excuse that if they drank too much and couldn't drive, they'd have a place to sleep. Emily didn't even think twice about it. She trusted Jake's judgment and followed them to the room without question. Inside the room, the boys continued their drinking challenge and encouraged Emily to join them. The room was small but cozy, with a large bed and a couch in the corner. Emily slumped onto the couch, laughing as Jake handed her another drink. "I think I'm done," she said, her head spinning. Jake insisted, "Come on, Emily. One more for the road." Emily hesitated but eventually gave in, sipping the drink as the boys cheered her on. It didn't take long before Emily was nearly unconscious, her head lolling to the side as she struggled to stay awake. The boys, however, were still full of energy, their inhibitions completely gone from the alcohol. Jake looked at the others and said in a quiet but firm voice, "This is it. We've talked about this for months. Are we really going to back out now?" Tyler hesitated, glancing at Emily, who was almost unconscious. "She's our friend," he said uncertainly. This doesn't feel right. Ryan agreed, his face conflicted. Maybe we should just let it go. She's drunk. But Jake wouldn't relent. She's enjoying it. She trusts us. She'd never think we'd hurt her. Nate, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke up. We've come this far. Let's just finish it. The group fell silent, the weight of their decision heavy in the air. Then, one by one, they agreed, convincing themselves that this was what Emily wanted, that it wasn't really that bad. Jake took the lead, lifting Emily off the couch and laying her on the bed. Emily stirred slightly, mumbling something incoherent. Ryan asked again, "Are you sure?" His voice trembled. Jake ignored him, focusing on Emily. "Everything's going to be fine," he said. "She's one of us. She understands." And so it began. What followed was a dark mix of actions and emotions, an ugly combination of drunkenness and betrayal. They took turns, their boundaries completely erased, their movements driven by lust and the distorted belief that Emily wanted this. They justified their actions, convincing themselves that she wasn't really unconscious, that she was enjoying it, even without her consent. Hours passed, and the boys finally collapsed onto the bed and couch, their energy spent. Emily remained motionless, her body limp and unresponsive. But as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, she slowly began to wake up. Her head was pounding, and her body ached in ways she couldn't immediately comprehend. She opened her eyes slowly, fragments of the previous night coming back to her. At first, she was confused, her mind struggling to piece together what had happened. Then, as she looked around the room and saw the disheveled state of the boys, the truth hit her like a freight train. You did this?" Her voice trembled. Jake, still half asleep, opened his eyes and smiled. "Yeah, we did. It seemed like you were enjoying it." Emily's heart sank, her confusion replaced by growing horror. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice rising. Ryan, still drunk, tried to reassure her. "Relax, Emily. Everything's fine. You're one of us, remember?" But Emily wasn't reassured. She was shattered. The people she trusted most had betrayed her in the worst possible way. She felt violated, humiliated, and completely alone. "You're monsters," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to me?" The boys looked at each other, their drunken bravado fading as the weight of what they had done settled heavily on their shoulders. The hotel room, dimly lit by the wall lamps, was a scene of chaos. Emily stood in the middle of the room, her hands trembling with rage as she tightly gripped a small knife. Her mind was a storm of anger and pain, the betrayal of the friends she had trusted more than anyone else tearing her soul apart. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and Emily's ragged breaths. Jake, her closest friend, and the one she had trusted the most, slowly rose from the bed. His face was pale, a mix of confusion and fear in his eyes. "Emily, put the knife down," he said, his voice shaky but trying to maintain authority. Emily screamed, "Don't tell me what to do." Her voice echoed in the small room. It was broken, the weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest like an anchor. "How could you do this to me? I trusted you." Jake raised his hands, his drunkenness making him react slower than usual. "We didn't mean to hurt you. That wasn't the point," he stammered. "That wasn't the point," Emily repeated furiously. "That wasn't the point? You drugged me. You took advantage of me. And now you have the nerve to say, that wasn't the point?" Ryan, who was still lying on the couch, stirred awake at the noise. He opened his eyes, confusion etched on his face. "What's going on?" he mumbled, his voice slurred. Emily's gaze turned to him, her anger intensifying. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice seething. "All of you betrayed me. You ruined my life." Ryan's eyes widened as he realized the gravity of the situation. "Look, we were drunk. We didn't mean—" Emily cut him off with a cold, sharp tone. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to justify what you did to me." Tyler and Nate began to stir as well, the alcohol in their systems slowing their movements. The room was now filled with the soft sounds of bodies shifting and incoherent attempts to explain, but Emily wasn't hearing any of it. All she could see were the faces of the boys who had shattered her trust, the people who had turned her world upside down in one horrific night. In a quiet but chillingly determined voice, she said, "You can't run from this. You can't pretend this never happened." Jake cautiously took a step toward her, his hands still raised. "Please, let's just talk about this. We're sorry, okay? We made a mistake." Emily repeated louder, "A mistake? A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake is spilling a drink. What you did to me wasn't a mistake. It was evil." Before Jake could respond, Emily lunged at him. The knife glinted in the dim light of the room and struck his shoulder. Jake screamed in pain, stumbling back as he clutched his wound. Blood seeped through his fingers, staining his shirt and dripping onto the carpet. The room descended into complete chaos as the other boys finally realized what was happening. Jake, still holding his wounded shoulder, watched in horror as Emily turned her attention back to him. He tried to crawl away, his movements slow and painful. "Emily, please," he begged, his voice barely audible. "Don't do this." Emily's voice was broken as she said, "You were supposed to be my friend. You were supposed to protect me, not destroy me." Jake tried to speak, but no words came out. Emily raised the knife one last time, her hands trembling and tears streaming down her face. "This is what you deserve," she whispered, and the knife came down. Ryan clumsily and unsteadily got to his feet. "Emily, stop!" he shouted, but she had already turned toward him. Her mind was filled with rage and despair as she advanced on him. "All of you deserve this," she said through clenched teeth. "You deserve to feel the pain you caused me." Ryan tried to back away, raising his hands to shield himself. "We're sorry. Please, Emily, don't do this," he pleaded. "We're sorry." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. Emily's knife found its mark, and Ryan collapsed to the floor. His agonized screams echoed through the small room. The other boys were now fully awake, their drunkenness replaced by pure terror. Tyler and Nate tried to make a run for the door, but their sluggish movements gave Emily the upper hand. She grabbed Nate by the arm, yanked him back, and plunged the knife into his side. Nate fell to the ground with a choked scream, blood pooling beneath him. Tyler froze, his back against the wall as he stared at Emily with wide, terrified eyes. "Emily, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We were drunk. We didn't know what we were doing." Emily responded with a bitter laugh, one devoid of any joy. "You knew exactly what you were doing," she said. "You planned it. You made me believe I was safe with you, and then you destroyed me." She took a step toward Tyler, and he dropped to his knees, sobbing. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Emily's voice was cold and merciless as she said, "Sorry doesn't fix anything." The knife came down again, and Tyler fell silent. The room fell silent again, the only sounds being the hum of the air conditioner and Emily's ragged breaths. She dropped the knife, her hands slick with blood, and stumbled back, collapsing onto the bed. Her mind was a storm of emotions: anger, grief, guilt, and relief. She had taken justice into her own hands, but the weight of what she had done was beginning to crush her. For what felt like an eternity, she sat in silence, staring at the lifeless bodies of the people who had once been her closest friends. Her phone on the bedside table rang, and she picked it up with trembling hands. She dialed the emergency number, her voice shaking as she said, "I need the police. I killed them. They hurt me, and I killed them." The operator tried to calm her and asked for details, but Emily could barely form coherent sentences. She gave the address of the hotel and hung up, her hands still trembling as she set the phone down. When the police arrived, the scene they encountered was unimaginable. The room was covered in blood, the bodies of 4 young men lying motionless on the floor and bed. Emily sat on the bed, her face pale and her eyes empty, staring at the knife on the carpet. The officers approached her cautiously, their voices gentle as they tried to get her to stand. She didn't resist as they cuffed her, her mind too numb to process what was happening. For Emily, the days following her arrest were a blur. She sat in a cold, sterile interrogation room, blood still dried under her nails as detectives questioned her. She recounted the events over and over, her voice trembling as she described the betrayal, the assault, and her rage. The detectives listened carefully, their faces serious as they pieced together the horrifying puzzle. The media labeled her both a victim and a monster. Some headlines described her as a brave young woman who had stood up against her attackers, while others called her a cold-blooded killer who had taken justice into her own hands. Social media was ablaze with heated debates, people divided over whether Emily's actions were justified or criminal. Emily's parents, who had always seen their daughter as innocent and trustworthy, were shattered. They struggled to reconcile the image of their sweet, cheerful girl with the blood-stained face she presented in court. Her mother, Lisa, wept uncontrollably during the trial, while her father, with a stony expression and clenched fists, bore witness to the nightmares his daughter recounted from the witness stand. The trial was an exhausting process. The defense attorney painted a vivid picture of a young woman pushed to her breaking point, a victim of unimaginable betrayal who had acted in a moment of despair. Psychologists were brought in to testify about the effects of trauma and how it could drive someone to do things they never thought themselves capable of. Emily's defense attorney emphasized, Emily Miller wasn't just the victim of a brutal assault. She was the victim of a betrayal of trust. These weren't strangers who attacked her. They were her closest friends, people she considered family. They violated her in every way possible and left her broken and teetering on the edge. But the prosecutor took a different stance. He acknowledged the assault and trauma Emily had endured, but argued that her actions went beyond self-defense. The prosecutor stated, "What happened to Ms. Titers, Henry Miller was abhorrent, and the perpetrators should have faced the full force of the law. But her actions were premeditated and calculated. She chose to be judge, jury, and executioner." Emily's testimony became the turning point of the trial. When she took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. All eyes were on the young woman who had become the center of one of the most shocking cases in recent memory. She recounted the events of that night in painful detail, her voice trembling as she described the moment she woke up and realized what had been done to her. She said, "I trusted them. I thought they were my friends. They were my family. But they took advantage of me. They treated me like I was nothing." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "When I saw them lying there, laughing and joking about what they had done, something inside me broke. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. All I saw was red." Her words left the courtroom in stunned silence. Even the judge, a seasoned professional who had presided over countless cases, was visibly moved by the raw emotion in her testimony. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as they returned with their verdict. Emily was found guilty of manslaughter, but due to the circumstances of the case, her sentence was significantly reduced. The judge acknowledged her trauma, but emphasized that taking 4 lives, no matter the justification, could not go unpunished. Emily was sentenced to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6 years. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. Some felt the sentence was too lenient, arguing that she had committed a massacre. Others believed it was too harsh, given the trauma she had endured. In prison, Emily struggled to come to terms with what had happened. The weight of her actions haunted her every waking moment, and the faces of her former friends appeared in her nightmares. She spent hours in therapy sessions, slowly unpacking the events of that night and the years of trust and friendship that had led to it. Her story became a cautionary tale, sparking conversations about consent, trust, and the consequences of betrayal. Universities and colleges across the country implemented mandatory sexual assault prevention and consent education programs, using Emily's case as an example of how quickly things could spiral out of control. The repercussions of that night reverberated through the small town like an earthquake, destroying lives and exposing the darkness hidden beneath the surface. For the families of Jake, Ryan, Tyler, and Nate, the pain of losing their sons was unbearable. They grappled with the reality of what their children had done, torn between anger at Emily for taking their lives and shame over their son's actions. Some parents publicly condemned her, while others remained silent, unable to reconcile their grief with the truth of their son's crimes. Years passed, and Emily slowly began to rebuild her life. When she was finally released from prison, she emerged as a changed woman. The girl who had once been full of life and trust was gone, replaced by someone older, wiser, and infinitely more cautious. She moved to another city, far from the memories that haunted her, and began working with organizations that supported survivors of sexual assault. Though she would never fully escape the shadow of her past, Emily found a sense of purpose in helping others. She shared her story with those who would listen, hoping to prevent anyone else from experiencing the pain she had endured. Emily's story was more than just a crime. She became a symbol of resilience, justice, and the indomitable strength of the human spirit. And though she carried the weight of her actions for the rest of her life, she vowed to use her pain to create a world where no one would have to endure what she had. If this story moved you, and you'd like to read more stories like this, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on our next thrilling and mysterious tales. Also, if you think this story might interest your friends, share it with them and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear which part of the story impacted you the most. By liking, subscribing, and sharing, you inspire us to create more stories. Thank you for being with us. Love.